Heywood and Poppy Price-Dowhan, who are going to talk about their accessible kids project that we were fortunate enough to be able to fund with our mini grants last year, and they're making very exciting impacts. So, please stand up.
Hello.
Can everyone see me? I'm guessing probably not. If I move a bit.
Hang on, let's move this back. I also feel like my mic is a lot louder than yours.
Possibly.
It is.
I'll just keep talking away. Anyway, I'm Poppy, and obviously this is Lisa. And this is actually our first time meeting in person. Yeah, great. Yeah, I know, we worked on the project for...
Like, we've been working together for like a year and a half, and this is the first time we're actually in the same room.
So my background is in folk dancing. I got really interested in Morris dancing in my early teens, and then ceilidh dancing and so on and so forth. Then I became disabled, so I started ceilidhing in my chair, and then I suddenly had a thought, oh yeah, about 4 years ago, I could also Morris dance in my chair. So I'm very passionate about getting anyone and everybody involved in some form of dancing, and I'm based in East Anglia.
Hello. My name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, her, and I am based in Rugby at the moment, in the Midlands. And my mother is also in the room, so you can blame her for getting into folk dancing. My parents were in the ceilidh band, my mum is a caller, yes, so I've been kind of indoctrinated since birth. I started off, yes, from this kind of folk dance perspective. I used to work with Shooting Roots, which is a youth folk project, and through that, I met Janet. And we were talking earlier about my first introduction to thinking about accessibility was organising a training weekend for Shooting Roots, where I suddenly realised I need to find an accessible venue that will let us camp in it and also has an accessible train station. And that kind of introduced me to what Jen was saying, that idea of disability tax, the disability admin. You know, I was having to do that thinking that Janet has to do all the time, anytime she goes somewhere. And so, yeah, I sort of just accessibility kept creeping into all aspects of my work, and I also work part-time for an accessible music organisation called Drake Music, and since last September I am their access coordinator, so I literally get paid to think about access all day, which is great. So I came up with the idea of doing this accessible ceilidh project. I applied for the EFDSS mini grants for dance, and they were like, yes, do that. So I had heard about Poppy, and I was like, I think Poppy is the right person for this project. So we have been collaborating entirely online up until this point, over Zoom and emails. The project plan was slightly more ambitious than we actually had the time and the resources for, of course. So originally it was going to be a survey and then some online workshops. We only really got to doing the survey bit, but it was much better responded to than we ever imagined. So it's just an online survey on Google Forms. We had over 100 people respond to it. And our target audience for that survey was disabled people who go to ceilidhs already. Because we felt like if we're trying to learn about how to make ceilidhs more accessible, it'd be better to consult first than the people who have lived experience and already go to ceilidhs. And I think a next stage of the project is to engage with people who are disabled who don't already go to ceilidhs, but we felt like learning from the experts what worked and what didn't, what needed to change, was the first step before we reached out to that group. So yeah, me and Poppy have both been involved in lots of different kind of projects around accessibility. So we're just going to talk a bit more in depth about some of those projects and about our kind of learnings from the survey, and then we're going to go over to this lovely dance space and do some practical stuff. So I'll hand back to Poppy.
Yes, so I'll start with a few kind of, very similar to what Janet was saying earlier, tips and differences between a access focus space versus a regular general ceilidh. First thing is, can you get there? Can everyone get there? Is there public transport? Okay, if there is, great. If you're driving, is there blue badge parking? And then actually getting into the venue, wherever it may be, is it level access? Are there disabled toilets? Is there a cleaner querying you? So on and so forth. Whereas with a general ceilidh, what I found is not a lot of that information is out there. And advertising something specifically as accessible, you need to list all the accessible things you are doing that makes it different, because you can never make a space completely accessible for everyone. It's not going to happen, and that's okay. But working with the people who turn up and what you can kind of do with the space you have is very important. So things like a quiet space, like we've been offered here today, wonderful. Where I live in a rural area, you hardly ever see that with a ceilidh, and it makes a massive difference. So there's lots of little things like that, and with that in mind, I decided to kind of start an accessible ceilidh group, a kind of space where people could regularly try out things, because the other side of a ceilidh is, if you don't know how to, say, use a wheelchair in a dance context, trying to figure it out very fast at ceilidh is very, very difficult with other people around you who may not also know how to dance with a wheelchair user or any type of disabled person with their different accessibility needs. So I started a regular group that, unfortunately, due to my own health and being disabled, I had to eventually stop. But it gave people a space to try out things. We had various different participants, both able-bodied and disabled. And we started off going through kind of common movements you see at a ceilidh and how you can then adapt it when you're on your own. Because, you know, galloping up the top of the set and back, that might not be doable, but you could probably go halfway. You could probably come halfway back. Or, oh yeah, there's swinging here. Oh wait, you could just have a rest here. Or you can use that extra time to get back to your space and be ready to go off again and not have to worry. And I think a lot of people found it very difficult just to approach a ceilidh without the idea that they could adapt it and get the feeling that they must do what the caller says, no matter what. And you don't have to. So I started that, and just checking my notes, sorry. Sorry, wrong page. It kind of, I realised as well something else was people were struggling to complete dances in the usual time and the usual speed. So I actually started bringing in different music, playing different music, and actually just making them longer, more A parts, more B parts, to give people time to do the full dance and not having to cut out bits if they didn't want to. So there's various different ways that we found to make things accessible.
Cool. So I think one thing that this project has really brought to the fore for me is, like Poppy said in her accessible ceilidh class, that was like a completely access-focused space. It was a time for people to kind of experiment and learn and, play around with that stuff outside of this kind of quite high intensity, like going to a established ceilidh event where, there's an established audience who are kind of expecting a certain thing, and whilst we do see wheelchair users at those events, I think it's fair to say that they are quite commonly wheelchair users and just generally disabled people who are kind of already involved and sort of embedded in the folk scene, and that those are not very accessible contexts for people who have not already experienced folk to try it for the first time. And so I think there's an interesting, if we want to bring more disabled people into the folk world, we need to kind of create those stepping stones of places which are focused around them and, you know, giving them an opportunity to learn and experiment without the pressure of like able-bodied people who are doing their own thing that they're used to. So going back to the survey that we did, one of the things that we asked, so we kind of had two sections. We asked, what do you want from an event, or what makes going to a ceilidh physically, or you know, not physically, but yeah, what makes going to a ceilidh accessible? What could be better? What good examples of that have we seen? Which kind of focuses a lot around stuff that Janet and Poppy have been saying about, you know, like public transport, telling people what, you know, level access and things you have. But we also asked people specifically about the dances. Are there bits of ceilidh dancing that you find more or less accessible? And as you can imagine, we got a huge range of responses. And as mentioned, you know, there was no magic bullet. There was no like, yes, this is the one accessible way. One thing that really demonstrated this was we kind of like came up, when we like sort of were analysing the data, we came up with a table of like the most loved and the most hated ceilidh moves, and like the same moves were on both lists. Some people love Strip the Willows, and some people hate Strip the Willows. And it's not even like, we had a manual wheelchair user who said, I love Strip the Willows because I can really, you know, I've got a lot of upper body strength, I can really swing around them. Whereas power wheelchair users, big turning circle, very difficult to do lots and lots of spinning. But some common themes came up around things like contact, like physical contact level, and interaction with different people. So common thing that people said was that they didn't like mixer dances, or at least they wanted to be warned about mixer dances, which is where you swap and dance with lots of different people. And some people suggested that they'd like to know when there's going to be a dance where you only dance with one person, where you only touch your partner. And likewise, just sort of like things about contact level. We did, of course, on the other end of that, have some people say, I'd like to be connected to other people, it helps me know where I am and what I'm doing. So the next thing that came up as a common theme was like the length of dances, energy levels, speed. So all things around, you know, being able to take breaks, even if it's in the middle of a dance. Knowing whether a dance is going to be a hop step that takes a lot of energy or a waltz, which is more laid back. You know, how long the caller runs the dance for, you know, is it going to go on for a really long time? Do you want to
I was going to say,
jump
you
in?
just reminded me of something. If I'm calling for a specifically advertised accessible event, my calling will differ quite a lot more. I'll be adding in more adaptions as I go, versus a general ceilidh I've been hired to call. And I'll always ask, you know, if people need adaptions, come tell me, because you can never know what will suit everyone. But yeah, the language, as the survey also brought up.
Yeah, I mean, clarity and callers being clear and making it really, you know, sort of explain the dance well also came up, didn't it? But I've mentioned a few specific moves that came up, so things that involve a lot of spinning. Some people loved spinning and wanted lots of it all the time, and some people were like, I really don't like spinning, and balance issues, or I get dizzy easy. And the other things around specific moves go back to the contact level thing. People said they didn't like baskets where you put your arms around each other's waists. It's too high a level of contact to feel comfortable with, or close swing holds again. And so kind of when we were thinking about what's the advice to give to callers, it kind of really boils down to providing variety, providing flexibility. And one thing I've been thinking a lot recently about, we say, in access-focused spaces, you can be very flexible, but also, in a regular ceilidh setting, you can, as a caller or an organiser, really set the tone. I've started doing a little spiel at the beginning of my ceilidhs where I say, I've just got a few things I'd like you to know about the way that I call before I start. The first is, your comfort is more important than doing what I say. Because I think somebody else mentioned earlier that when you, like, dance spaces, if we think about people going to a dance class, you're meant to do what the teacher says. And if you don't do what the teacher says, you're doing it wrong. And that, I think, is the mindset that a lot of people just have because of society. When they're going to a ceilidh, you're learning a dance, you're meant to do what the teacher says. So I'd like to say right at the beginning, you can do something else. I don't mind. Adapt it to suit your body. If your body's saying, I don't want to do that, if you're not comfortable with doing that, please do something else. And you have my permission to do that. The next thing I say is that ceilidh dancing is a group activity. Please look after each other and, you know, help each other out. You know, and, you know, I also include things in my calling where I, for example, if I do a basket, I will teach the low contact version. I will say, which is it's sort of like Old Lang Syne, if you can imagine it, 4 people joining up their hands crossed over in a small circle. But then I also say there is another version where you put your hands around each other's waists. Have a discussion in your group of 4 to decide which version you would like to do. I quite often invite people to make a group decision about which version of something they like to do. And then the other thing is just giving as much advanced information about the dances. We know that not everyone going to ceilidh is going to know the names of the dances, but there are specific things that will help. There's sort of information that people who regularly go to ceilidhs will want to know, and information that you can give that will be more widely applicable. So, for example, this next dance is going to be a Strip the Willow dance. That means it's going to have lots of spinning in it. So if you love spinning, this is the dance for you. And that gives people enough information, like, oh, I don't like spinning. I'm not going to do that dance, even if you don't know what Strip the Willow is. And so I realise I feel like I'm just rambling a lot, but I'm just going to finish off by talking about another project that I've been involved in, which I run I'm like really interested in what Penny and those guys were saying, because so I run a regular weekly barn dance class for a group. It's kind of a day centre for adults with learning disabilities called Independence for Me, and they are open every weekday, sort of 9 till 4 or something. And the way that I got involved with them was that I actually offered I was just randomly posting on village Facebook groups and things saying, I've got a maypole. Does anybody want a free maypole dancing session? Because I was kind of learning how to teach maypole dancing, and so I was trying to like get some more experience. And one of the leaders of this group said, we'll do it. And so I went along, and we had a great session in their little garden. And then afterwards they said, oh, we've actually been looking for a regular dance teacher because we had one and they've moved on. Would you like to do a trial session of a regular barn dance class for the group? And so I did, and it went well. And we're 2 years in now. We've got a range of communication styles and mobility. We don't have any wheelchair users at the moment, but we do have some folks with quite limited sort of walking ability. And it's just been an absolute joy, and I would highly recommend, like the 2 things, learning points I think from this are A, offer people free sessions. Like nobody wants to, like if you've not already tried something and you don't know if it's going to work for you, like people, like we've talked about the disability tax in terms of time, there's also the disability tax in terms of money, and everything being more expensive when you're disabled. So offering people an opportunity to try for free, I think is a really good way to bring people in. And then also working with a group regularly, and I think that's again what Penny's group really does. Well, you can learn people's names, you can form relationships with them, you can really really learn to understand their communication styles. I have quite a lot of dancers who are mostly non-verbal, but they can do, I want to be the one in the Circassian circle, or I want to be the two. And we took a while to, I think it was about a year in when we got to the Circassian circle. Before that, I was doing very, sort of simplified dances, which maybe only had 2 moves in them. One of my favourite is a simplified set and turn single, or slowed down set and turn single, where you go right and left, and right and left, and turn around on the spot. A lot of my group have balance and sort of dizziness issues, so turning in rounding 8 counts really works better for them, and some of them just choose not to do the turn, and that's also fine. But yeah, after a year of working together with mostly the same group, we built up to the Circassian circle. And it's one of their favourite dances now, we do it almost every time, and I always give them the choice, do you want to be the 1 or the 2? Decide in your pair, giving them the agency over that. And I just want to share an amazing thing that happened yesterday in our class, which is we've been talking in our little sort of water break, one of the participants and me, about football. He was wearing an Aston Villa shirt, and he was saying how his best friend in the group supports Birmingham City. Bit of rivalry. And so when we got to the Circassian circle, the Aston Villa supporter, who usually is like, I want to be the 1, said this time, I want to be the 2. And he, the Birmingham City supporter, is going to be the 1. And that's the score. Aston Villa 2, Birmingham City 1. So we just have so much fun. We're a real little community. When I was featured on Dancing on Ice 2 weeks ago, they all saw me on TV, and I got the, and were like, oh yeah, it's our dance teacher. So it's just a lovely thing to do. And I'm going to pass over to Poppy again now, and we are going to get moving.
Yeah. So those who'd like to come join us for a bit of dancing,